Okay guys, so I wanted to cover a video about neighbors. And the basic point I want to discuss is when you're working on a job and the neighbor comes out and basically asks you to do some work for them, they always seem to want a discount because you're there. So basically, my point being, you got to be very careful with these jobs. Primarily because if you give a cheaper price to the neighbor as opposed to your regular project, and if they compare prices, you can get into a heaping load of trouble. Now, what do I mean by this? So basically, I was doing a job. I was called to do a driveway for a lady, and she calls me up, needs a driveway and part of her walkway redone for her insurance purposes. And the reasoning was she was built kind of onto a hill, so they didn't have a walkway going to the front of the house. You walked up the driveway, made a left, and walked to the house. So the insurance company got involved, said it was a bit of a hazardous condition, and her driveway was pretty beat up. So I gave her a price, and it turned out she was a former teacher of mine back in high school. I also bid the project in the middle of the winter. So, of course, winter pricing is a little cheaper. And because she was my teacher, I gave her a break. And what wound up happening was just a whole series of events that just really snowballed into a major problem. So I gave her her price. Now, granted, we're in the middle of the winter, and she's my teacher. I gave her a price for the job at $3,000. And the neighbor came out and said, I would like the same thing done on my home. But we did not get to the job till April. So now, after the snow in the winter, we didn't do the job until April. So now I gave her a spring price, which is the busiest time, and I didn't give her a teacher discount because she's the neighbor. So it wound up to be a little more money. She asked my customer, my teacher, for my estimate sheet, and she gave it to her, not realizing what she was doing. Even though I did tell her I was giving her a discount for being my teacher, and it was a winter price, and even though we didn't get to it till April, I wasn't raising the price, the material didn't go up. So now I wound up with a hostile neighbor. And to boot, I had to pull out 2 stumps and dispose of them so her landscaper could put new sod in the front. They were relatively small, but it was still work. It was an extra trip for the truck. And it's a lot of money to dump stumps in New York, especially in the garbage dump. So what wound up happening was we signed the contract, and she refused to pay. She cut my bill by $300 for absolutely no reason. I accepted it. I had to walk away. I was going to take her to court, but I wound up not. Then I get a phone call in June, which is approximately a month and a half after the job is done. And she claims she had to spend $650 to repair all the damage that we had caused. She claimed that we broke her sprinkler lines, 3 of them, and the dirt that we put to fill in the stump holes had washed onto the sidewalk, and she had gotten a sanitation violation. So I explained to her, and she actually brought up taking me to court. So once someone brings up taking me to court, I kind of lose the interest in working for them, working with them, I should say. So I said to her, please forward all of the information you have to my attorney, and he'll take it from there. I said, there's really no reason for us to continue in contact. So I asked her if she could just do me one favor and faxed me over the bill the landscaper gave. I said I would also like to speak to him about the job, because I was very interested to know the sprinkler lines that we broke, because I was on the site and we didn't break anything. And I was there and we were quite cautious about the sprinkler lines that she did tell us about. So I was a little bit perturbed, to say the least, by her. And she just continued to threaten to sue me. So when I told her to sue me and let me see her evidence, I never heard from her again. She never faxed me over the landscaping bill. She never sent anything over to my attorney. She never called Consumer Affairs, which she said she was going to do. And I actually called her 3 times and left her messages to try to resolve this problem. She just wanted me to give her $650. Because she said, you could give me $650 and we'll forget this ever happened. And of course, I'm not going to do that without seeing some shred of documentation. And she had none. So the point is, be careful with the neighbors. Now, the second thing I want to talk to you about is if neighbors don't like each other and how this can cost you money. So, 2 neighbors don't like each other on a job. The driveways are next to each other. They're joined. They're split in the middle by a Homasode expansion joint, which is fairly typical in New York. So, what ended up happening on this job was the neighbor hired us to do the driveway, the one house, and the other house doesn't want to do it. So I even saw cut the driveway to make sure that we didn't damage anything, because they said that she was hostile. So we take out the driveway, we pour the new concrete. So now I want to try to put a barricade to make sure she doesn't drive on the concrete. So my customer says, please don't put anything on her property. I was going to put a sheetrock pail with an orange fence. You know, have sheetrock pails with the 4x4 posts in them and hang an orange fence on it. The driveways were wide, so it wasn't like she would have no room to pull in. And she had a little car anyhow. So she said, please don't do that. So I wound up putting 2 sheetrock pails at either end of the driveway. It's 40 feet long. And rolling out some heavy-duty caution tape, the tear-resistant tape. And we left. A couple of days later, I get a phone call from my customer that says the driveway is cracked. And what happened was, the neighbor, she drove her car on the cement the night we poured it. And this is in the summertime, so it was semi-hard, but still soft. And it cracked 2 of the edges where we would put an expansion joint long ways. So she cracked 1 box that was 10 by 9 in 2 places by driving our car on top of it. So she said, well, what are we going to do about this? I said, well, my contract is we don't guarantee the concrete like that. We can't guarantee concrete at any rate anyhow. But even so, it's going to cost probably close to $1,000 to rip out this particular box. So I told her I would change it for the cost that it would cost me and basically lose the day of work. She told me that was unacceptable. I should do it for free. I said, well, get the money from your neighbor. I mean, she was the one who ran it over. You could see she left the tire prints on the cement. It made a very little indentation. I took photographs of it, of course. Took photos of the cracks. The neighbor, of course, refused to pay, said it wasn't her fault, and we didn't pour the driveway correctly. So those were 2 instances where I had issues with neighbors where it cost me money and it really shouldn't have. And in the end, we didn't change the driveway. The driveway is still like that to this day. It still looks beautiful. It just has 2 cracks by those edges. And it probably cost me a customer and maybe, future referrals. But for me, there was nothing I could do. I didn't want to barricade the driveway in this fashion. She probably did it. The neighbor probably did it to my customer on purpose, thinking it would hurt whoever. So those were 2 instances where neighbors can really cost you money. why I'm bringing this up is a friend of mine called me. That's where I'm coming back from now. A friend of mine called me. He's having a surveying issue. The survey is off by 2 feet from their homes. And the neighbor wanted to put in an asphalt driveway. So they had a discussion about it, and the neighbor was going to put up a fence. So my friend said, okay, but keep it on your property line. But there's a 2-foot discrepancy between the two surveys. So in the interim, they said, well, we won't encroach on the property that you feel is yours. We'll put the asphalt to the line that we think it is, and we'll put the fence up. So my friend agreed to it. He comes home, the asphalt is not only 2 feet over, but then when they do the fence, they put it on his side as well, according to what he believes. So I say according to what he believes is because we don't know which survey is right. So they're now fighting. It's going to go to court. So my advice to him was to call in a third surveyor that was independent and do a new survey for both homes. So now, of course, lawyers are involved, the building department is involved, the county. So now it's a whole thing where, you know, neighbors can really be costly to your business. So please be very, very careful. If you're going to give someone a discount, please stress it that they keep it to themselves. Maybe even tell them what the regular price would be and say, well, I'm giving you a discount, whether it's winter or you're my friend or you're the teacher. You know, try to be explicit that don't share the price with other people, because I'm not going to work for them at that price. And maybe I should have been a little more explicit with my teacher, but I wasn't. And it cost me. And it cost me a couple of $100 in the process. And then it caused me a heartache with the phone calls afterwards. I mean, she really tried to extort me. So just be very, very careful when you're doing projects with neighbors, when you're giving prices. Just because you're there does not mean you should work for less. You should still charge your price. You still have to execute their job. Just because you're there, 9 out of 10 times, you're going to have to truck out material, and it's probably going to cost you extra money. And the material, the concrete or the sod or whatever you're doing, is still going to cost money to import. The material is still the same. The permits are the same if necessary. So if you're going to give a discount, maybe $100 off, $150, but don't go crazy. You know, always keep your price, because if someone else is estimating the job, they're going to estimate it at their price. They're not going to say, oh, well, there was work going on next door, let me give these people a cheaper price. So just try to be wary of all of these points moving forward when you're bidding and estimating jobs. And so basically, that's my advice for tonight. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, comments, maybe I handled the situation wrong, maybe you feel I could have handled it differently, sound off on it. Feel free. All right, guys, have a good night. Have a safe weekend. I'll talk to you soon.